Hello, gentlemen, and welcome to the Men Save Your Marriage show. My name is Terry. I'm your host. I did an autopsy on my failed marriage, and now I use the lessons that I learned to coach other men on how to save their marriage before it fails. I'm going to share with you the things I wish someone would have shared with me before my marriage failed. Are you ready? Let's get started. Hello, gentlemen. Welcome back. You heard the bell. You are now in the ring, and we are here for episode number 10 of the Men Save Your Marriage podcast. And today we're going to be talking about breaking the cycle of blame in your marriage. This is a big topic. This one is a really big one. Now, I want you to stick around to the very end of the episode because I'm going to share with you a little something different, do something a little different than I've ever done before. So make sure you stick around. But let's get into this, shall we? Breaking the cycle of blame in your marriage. I'm sure we all know, obviously you're listening to this podcast, this is where we find ourselves, but we know that blame can destroy a marriage. When your marriage is in a bad place, it seems like almost every conversation, but certainly every argument, every disagreement, they just always seem to just race towards a place to where you're blaming her and she's blaming you, and things are being brought up, maybe things you've already dealt with, but it's just a way to throw blame, and it's just a horrible place to find yourself. And if you're anything like I was as my marriage was falling apart, you are trying to figure out how in the world do we stop this? How do we stop this blame? How do we stop this cycle? Because every single time, and you'll get to a place to where you almost don't even want to engage with her for a while, because it almost feels like every single engagement is going to end in an argument, in a disagreement, and with somebody blaming or accusing somebody else. So how do we break this cycle? I want to kind of introduce this topic today and give you some things to think about, and kind of just start planting the seeds for where we go from here for you. I can't tell you about her. I have no idea what kind of woman she is. And I don't know women that well, obviously, but I do know us. I know us guys, and I know how blame works in our heads. And that's what we're going to kind of dive into here a little bit today. So this episode is going to teach you how to break that cycle of blaming her for all of the problems, or for her blaming you, and how you can adopt a kind of a solutions-focused mindset instead of just blame. As always, I come at you today with 3 points. I'm just going to keep it short, simple, and sweet here, because this is one where you may want to go get the show notes and read through it, make your own notes, maybe print it out and make your own notes about your mindset and your life and your marriage, and how you can kind of adjust and tweak what you're hearing or reading from me and apply it to your marriage. This may be one where you just need to spend some time in thought and thinking about these things. So let's get started with our first topic here in the episode guide today. First, exploring why blaming your spouse creates distance and resentment. And I think we probably all know what does it, but just very quickly, obviously, when we start throwing blame around, whether it's you blaming her or her blaming you, it doesn't matter. This obviously, you're in a place of poor communication, and it always leads to poor communication because now we're really not communicating. The defenses are up, and the hair on the back of your neck is standing up because you know what's coming as an accusation, or you're ready to lob one at her because the communication has deteriorated to a place to where now we're in that defensive argument kind of posture, and we're ready to either defend against blame that's coming our way or to lob blame back at her, and now we're in a battle again. So poor communication is certainly one of the things that the blame can create, but is also one of the things where we find that's where blame is created, is in the poor communication. One of the other things that comes from blaming your spouse, whether it's you blaming her or her blaming you. But when you get into this blame cycle with her, one of the other things that comes from this, and one of the other reasons for this, is because of emotional distance. If you haven't been getting along well, there's been really no good communication. There's probably been no intimacy. And all of this leads to this distance between you. And suddenly you feel like this is a person that you don't really know. And oh my God, how are we even surviving? And so it creates this emotional distance, and then you pile that on top of poor communication, and now this is just a stranger in my house, or I'm just a stranger in her house. It doesn't matter. And ultimately, those two things, the poor communication and the emotional distance, are going to lead to, but they also come from a place of resentment. And now there's stored up anger and frustration that feeds into resentment. And now you're resenting her, and that's going to continue to want to pile on the blame. She's resenting you. She's angry at you. So she's going to want to continue to pile on the blame. And now we're in this massive cycle of blame where you go right back to that place to where every engagement feels like a skirmish that's going to escalate to a real battle. And that battle is going to deteriorate to a place where you're both in that posture of defensiveness and you're in that posture of laying blame on somebody else. And so we have to figure out, how do we stop this? And where do we even begin, right? How does this stop? How do we just stop doing this? And I can remember the frustration so vividly. But breaking the cycle of blame begins when you stop blaming her and start taking responsibility. Now, I'm speaking to the guys here, okay? And I don't know if some of you may have heard this, some of you may feel like this, some of you may have not ever thought about this. But this is the way it worked for me. Breaking the cycle of blame for me began when I stopped blaming her for anything. And I started taking responsibility for everything. Now, notice I did not say I started blaming myself, and I don't want you to start blaming yourself. No, you don't blame yourself. You just take responsibility. You see, when you blame yourself, you feel useless or worthless. You will beat yourself up. And you can't do that because you are needed. You are needed in your family. You are needed in your life, whether it's in her life, in children's lives, in work, with your friends, just in our society in general. You are needed, but you cannot go through life blaming yourself. You can go through life taking responsibility. And I know that sounds like I'm walking a fine line, and I'll dig into this because I will tell you, the minute that I stopped blaming myself, but I took full responsibility for everything, it is a complete game changer. I took responsibility for our arguments. I took responsibility for where our marriage was. I took responsibility for how she felt about me, about how I felt about her. I took responsibility about our children. And when our children, if they made a mistake or if they messed up, I would start to look at myself and think, what could I have done? I'm not blaming myself. I'm not beating myself up. I'm just asking questions. What could I have done so that my child would have not made that decision? Could I have done something maybe before that they made a different, that would have helped teach them or lead them or guide them to where they may have made a different decision? So if you really want to begin to break the cycle of blame, this is where it starts. You're not going to blame her. You're not even going to blame yourself, but you are going to take responsibility for everything. Everything. I cannot stress that enough. So what does it look like to take these steps for taking responsibility? And I'm going to throw this caveat in there: taking responsibility without self-criticism. Because if I encourage you to take responsibility and I leave you with just that, it's just a matter of time before you are literally beating the hell up out of yourself. Because you will call yourself every name in the book. You will think that you are a worthless piece of this and that and the other, and that is not what I'm saying at all. What I'm saying is, in taking responsibility rather than laying blame, you can begin to look inward. You can show compassion to yourself. And we're going to get into a couple of these things here in a minute. But what you can really begin to do is to learn about yourself. So some tips for, let's call it, compassionate accountability without beating yourself up. Number one, get curious. within yourself, get curious. What do your behaviors mean? Why do you blow up? What does she say that pushes your buttons? When you begin to ask yourself, what does she say? Why does my buttons get pushed when she says this or I acts like that? You're beginning to take the power away from that button, because now you're going to start to learn from it. So ask yourself, this is where you get curious. What do those behaviors mean? And then what insights into yourself can you learn from that? You see, self-blame and criticism or punishment, they don't yield insight, but curiosity does. So the first one, get curious about yourself. Just begin there. The second one, talk to yourself like you would someone else you loved, almost like a child. Talk to yourself like you would a dear friend, and they made a mistake. You're not going to call them stupid names. You're not going to tell them they screwed up. You're going to be there for them with compassion and with love, and help them try to figure out maybe where the mistake was made, where the error was, and what could be done to correct it. That's the same way you need to approach yourself. So talk to yourself like you would someone else that you loved, someone outside of yourself. Or maybe like a child, or maybe even like yourself as a child. See, you shift how you talk to yourself by doing so like you would talk to a child. And then what would that younger version of you need to hear if you're thinking about the younger version of yourself? So this isn't the get up and walk it off and you're stupid and you're a screw up. Oh, no. This is where you talk to yourself in a different way. Wait a minute. And I would ask myself, and I can remember vividly, and I still do this to this day. I'll ask myself, once I learned these techniques, Terry, what were you thinking? What was going on in your head that when she said those things, you blew up, or you snapped, or you blamed her? What's the reaction? Are you feeling guilty about something? Is there something in there that you need to work through, that she could push that button, or that you could let a conversation about this topic cause you so much struggle and anger and frustration? And when I got curious, and then I began to talk to myself in a different way, and I began to ask myself questions in a different way, it began to change things. And then the third thing is, what does accountability look like after you've established some self-compassion? So how do you hold yourself accountable? How do you take that responsibility for everything and do it in a way where you're not beating yourself up? Maybe it's just as simple as reflecting on an experience and integrating some lessons that you may have learned from it. Because I can tell you that in my marriage, when it was the blame game and things were falling apart, I never walked away from one of those episodes where an interaction with her led to a disagreement, or led to that almost vortex where we just spiraled down into the blame and the arguments and the frustration. I never once walked away from those asking myself questions like, what could I have learned from it? I was too busy being angry. I was too busy being, angry at her, or trying to deflect the anger that she had kind of pushed my way. But when I started to show some accountability to myself, not to anybody else, but when I started to show some accountability to myself, but then I figured out how to do it with a little bit of self-compassion and show myself some grace, then I could step away from a situation, or I could think back to a situation from before, one that maybe I did not walk away from learning anything because of my attitude and actions in the moment, but now I can look back on it and start to maybe learn from that. So it could be just as simple as reflecting on the experience and integrating some of those lessons that you may have learned. So figure out how you can, from interactions, from attitudes, from your reactions, how can you learn from those? And do this with a twinge of self-compassion in there, and you'll begin to learn. And as you begin to learn, you'll experience more, and you'll understand yourself better. And then what happens if you take that current compassion for yourself plus those new lessons that you've learned, and what does that happen? Well, here's kind of a formula. Current compassion plus new lessons learned equals future change. So if you're compassionate with yourself, you're not beating yourself up, you're not blaming yourself. You're taking responsibility and you're learning about yourself. So current compassion plus new lessons learned from experiences, or even new lessons learned from previous experiences. Going forward, that equals future change. Because then you're going to get to a place to where maybe you find yourself in a conversation, you find yourself in an engagement with her where it could deteriorate. This starts to feel like maybe we could be descending to the battlefield again. And I can feel myself wanting to posture, and I can feel myself wanting to grow defensive. But because you showed yourself some compassion, and because you tried to take some lessons from an experience before, and because you're learning more about yourself now, the future change could be something just as simple as looking at her in the moment going, wait, just hang on, listen. I can feel myself escalating here, and I don't want that for us today. So let's do this. Let's back away, and let's resume this later when we're not defensive, when we're not angry, when we're not ready to throw blame at each other. Let me check back in with you in an hour, or maybe this evening, or something of that nature. Now what's happened? Now she's looking at you like you've got two heads, and she's wondering, who are you and where did you come from? Because what you've done is you've taken that current compassion for yourself as you take responsibility, and you've taken those lessons that you're learning, and now it is equaling a future change. This is exciting stuff, and it can be groundbreaking for you. For me personally, I learned it too late, and it wasn't groundbreaking for my marriage, but I can tell you it has been transformative in my personal life since. It is absolutely critical. And sometimes taking that accountability, this is there's current compassion and there is new lessons learned and there's future change. But sometimes accountability may look like just making amends or repairing a relationship. I will tell you, there have been times, even after my marriage had failed, where I had to go back to her and say, listen, I want you to know something. And there was plenty of time in between, so this wasn't like just all of a sudden. Excuse me, but I can remember vividly going back and saying, "Listen, I need you to hear that. Remember this instance. Remember that day, that things I said, or the way I acted, or whatever it was. I just want you to know that I've learned from that, and I really am sorry for the way that I acted or the things that I said." And I want you to know that I am continuing to try to learn from those things. And that is absolutely transformative. So it is imperative that you not only have that accountability, but you have that self-compassion. And you're learning these lessons and you're making the future changes, but there may be instances where you need to go back, especially if you want to really save your marriage. You may need to go back and just, this is just kind of what the Italians call a mea culpa. Listen, remember this instance, remember this day. I just want you to know I've kind of learned some lessons from that, and I just want to, again, a mea culpa. I apologize, and leave it, and it's done, and walk away from it. Okay, so those are the first couple, right? That was exploring why blaming your spouse creates distance and resentment. We talked about that. And then we just talked about providing some steps for taking responsibility without the self-criticism. And finally, we're going to shift the mindset from who's at fault to how can we fix this. This is, again, you beginning to take that responsibility for everything. Constant self-blame is exhausting, so you can't beat yourself up, because you can erode the foundation of your own self-respect. And if you are remotely close to where I was as my marriage was falling apart, I had no self-respect for myself, none. But I'm telling you, and listen to me clearly, if you hear nothing else today in this episode, listen to this. Self-respect is the way out of self-blame. Now notice I didn't again say accountability, personal accountability. You can take accountability or responsibility for everything, but you cannot blame yourself. And if you are beating yourself up, the way out of that is self-respect. And this is the importance of of learning to be self-compassionate is clear. I mean, deep compassion doesn't come easy for those of us that are stuck in the blame cycle. But practice can help shift this, and you can practice self-compassion. I'm going to give you a couple of quick things here, but just again, if you hear nothing else, self-respect is your way out of self-blame. Self-respect is your way out of self-blame. And I'm going to tell you a little story here right towards the end about how I regained my self-respect. But here, deep compassion doesn't come easy for those stuck in the blame cycle. And if you're in that cycle, it is difficult to imagine having deep, really significant compassion for yourself. But practice can help shift this. What I mean by that? You need to learn how to honor your limitations and to take breaks. And that may be an anathema to you as a man. You're not allowed to get tired. You're not allowed to stop. I'm telling you, that needs to go. You need to understand you are human. You're going to get tired. You're going to get sleepy. You need time to yourself. You need to understand your limitations, and don't be afraid to just sit down and take a break. Also, writing down self-critical voice and responding with kindness. Do you beat yourself up? Do you beat yourself up? Do you say something to yourself, oh, you're such an idiot, or why would you do that, or whatever it is? Maybe just get a pad of paper and write that down. Maybe just exploring that as you write it out may be enough to begin to trigger something in your mind to where, wait a minute, I really am worth something. I shouldn't be beating myself up that significantly. How could I change and learn from this and change and respond to myself with kindness rather than constantly beating myself up? This one's going to sound a little silly, but visualize negative thoughts as just a passing cloud. Because it is. You're just in transition. A negative thought is just a transitional moment. Just let it go. And just kind of visualize, oh, I had this negative thought about myself because I don't feel like I measure up here. I don't feel like I measure up there. That's just a momentary cloud. It's just one little rain shower. Let it go. And and you can dig into this, there's some self-compassion meditations and mantras if that's your thing. And for some of us, it may just be writing it in a journal. For others, it may be, a meditation. For some, it may be a mantra. I have learned for myself what works for me, and what works for me is irrelevant. You got to find what works for yourself. But you need to find a way that you can, on a regular, consistent basis, step into self-compassion, to where you stop beating yourself up. You recognize that you are worth something. You are significant in society and in the world, and the world needs you. So now let me finish. Obviously, that was a lot. So you got a lot to take in. You may need to listen to this again or go get the show notes and really start to understand this for yourself. But you need to begin working on your low self-esteem. Okay? Remember, what did I tell you? Self-esteem is what? Self-esteem is the key forgive me. Self-esteem is the key to stopping the self-blame. Okay? Now, what does that look like? Two things. One, to begin working on your low self-esteem, you have to stop lying to yourself. You see, the reason it's so easy to beat yourself up is because you are the only person in the world that has heard every lie that you've told to yourself. You see, you haven't heard every lie that I've told to myself. So it would be easier for you to have compassion for me. But because you've heard every lie you've ever told to yourself, it's easier for you to be more critical to yourself. So you have to begin by stop lying to yourself. And you have to work. This is how you begin working on any self-esteem issues. And I would challenge you, this is what worked for me. Start small with one thing. And I'll tell you this is what I did. Just a moment of clarity, if you will, where I needed to figure out who I was, and I needed to figure out my self-esteem and stop lying to myself. And I'm lying to myself at the time. I'm lying to myself about how much alcohol I was consuming. I was lying to myself about where my marriage was. I was lying to myself about quite a few things. And I knew I had to stop, but I did. It was so much to take in all at once. So I had to try to figure out, well, where do I stop? What do I do? What do I do? What do I do? And then just in a moment of clarity, I thought, okay, I've got to choose one thing and just never lie to myself about that ever again. And this is going to sound so stupid. I've never told this to anybody. Here I am putting it out in the world. But here's what it was for me. I made a promise to myself that every time I did my laundry, my work clothes, my clothes for work or whatever, every time I did my laundry, when I get it into the washer, when it's done, I'm going to get it into the dryer. But when I get it out of the dryer, I had a bad habit. I have in my office and my bedroom, they're all one. I have an area, sitting area, and I had a bad habit of just taking the clothes, pulling them out of the dryer, bringing them into my room, and laying them over that chair. And the promise that I made to myself was I would never again do that. That when the clothes came out of the dryer, I would take the 3 minutes or 5 minutes, whatever it was, fold the underwear and the shorts and the T-shirts and put them in the drawer. Take the shirts that needed to be hung up and the pants that needed to be hung up. Go grab some hangers out of my closet, hang them up, and put them up. That's it. I know that sounds completely stupid, and right now you're driving or walking on a treadmill or whatever, and you're thinking, oh my God, Terry, that's where you started? I'm telling you, that's how bad off I was. That's where I was and where I needed to start, was just simply, I will never lie to myself again about laundry. And when my laundry comes out of the dryer, I don't return to my computer. I don't go back to watching television. I don't, do anything else. I immediately take it, lay it out across my bed, fold what needs to be folded, the socks, the underwear, the shorts go in the drawers, the undershirts go in the drawers, and then the T-shirts and the dress shirts and the pants, they all get hung up immediately, and it's all put away. That's it. I didn't make myself any other promises. I didn't make myself any other contingencies. I didn't dive into the ways I was lying to myself about alcohol or my relationship or anything else. All I did was make myself that one promise. I have seen it through every single time since, and I'm telling you, that was the starting point. And with that came momentum. If I can continue after a few weeks, after a couple of months, if I can continue to be honest with myself here, now where else can I be honest with myself? And that's how the momentum began. All right, guys, that's a lot of information I just threw at you in the last 25 minutes. This is how we break the cycle of blame in the marriage. We take the responsibility. We take the responsibility without beating ourselves up. We take the responsibility without being too critical and showing ourselves some significant, deep compassion. And from there, we begin to change our mindset from who's at fault to how can we fix this. And then at the same time, you're working on your self-esteem by stop lying to yourself and start with one small thing, even if it's just your laundry. But you got to start somewhere. Now, I promised you at the beginning I was going to do something a little different here, and here's what I want you to do. This is episode number 10, and I've never really pushed out a kind of a call to action, but here it is today. I want you to text me, and I want you to text me at this number. I'm going to give you a number in a second, and here's why. I want you to text me with that one small thing that you're going to never lie to yourself about again. For me, it was laundry. So if I were you and I were texting, here's what I want. Send me a text. Terry, that's my name. Terry, I will never lie. Laundry. Terry/laundry. That's what you won't lie to yourself about. Okay? Now, the reason I'm asking you to do this is because I want to respond to you by text. I'm going to give you, I'm going to respond with a Bible verse. And it is a verse that I understand how it says when it's read, but I had somebody come into my life that kind of gave me an understanding of this verse in a little bit different way, and it was an absolute game changer for me. And it goes right along with the self-esteem and the compassion and the things and stopping the blame, but what this episode is about. So here's what I want you to do. I just want you to text me with your name and one or two words or a sentence of the one thing you're going to stop lying to yourself about. And what's the one thing that you're going to use as the first stepping stone to begin working on your low self-esteem? That's it. Your name and what's the one thing. And I want you to text me at 812-648-3380. Guys, thanks for being here today. I appreciate it so much. I just love where we're going with this, and I hope this is beneficial and helpful to you. Thanks again, and I'll see you on the next episode. You have a great day.